Today we're looking at Diamine's Golden Brown. Diamine's Golden Brown is a brown ink. And to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Noodler's Nib Creeper to take my notes for this video. Now before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. And with this one, we see this very light peach as it moves up, and then we get kind of this orange. The brown is there, and it's got this really neat blue across the top. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And to tell you the truth, while the peach is a little darker at the bottom and the ink does not travel as far, otherwise it looks the same. You might not be able to truly tell the difference if I covered up the labels at the top where I can see that D. Makes me feel like there's not going to be a lot of resistance here. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it takes that very well. In fact, the highlighter makes this ink kind of pop a little bit more off the page, but it's completely legible. Makes it safe to use in a note-taking situation. Water reactivates and lifts only the darkest parts of the ink, leaving this very light brown behind. Now, Pen Flush does everything that water did and then some. We start to see some of the white of the paper come through and can even see some of the dots from the Rhodia dot paper. Makes me say that Pen Flush is your stopping point to clean this out of your pen. Now, bleach, as would be expected, obliterates it from the page, but please don't use bleach to clean this out of your pens. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Diamine's Golden Brown has a viscosity of 1.47, making it holy moly a wet ink. Although it did not cross that 1.3 line, this is very wet. To find my average dry times, I use the writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I've found the average dry time to be 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Diamine's Golden Brown has an average dry time of 15 seconds, making it very normal. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Beautiful, gentle shading throughout this ink. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does offer that same beautiful gradual shading through all of the writing. It's a noticeably lighter tone than I got with the 1.1. Very nice to look at. Same tones for the medium. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And because the ink goes down a little heavier and the lines are a little thicker, the shading is much more obvious here than it is here, and it's obvious up here. 14 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us plenty of color variation. The smear test, you may be able to recover it. I'm throwing that as a maybe out there. Tomoe River, ignoring where it starts to bleed on the scrubby because I'm putting it down stupid thick. It has no bleeding. It does have ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. No shade, sorry. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And yes, we get some of the color variation. It is not as noticeable, but it definitely is there. You kind of have to just stop and look at it like a picture, and you see the color variation. But if you're reading it, the color variation doesn't seem to jump out as much. Look at it like a picture, the whole paper, and all of a sudden you see darker and lighter, much darker, much lighter. Pretty to look at. 16 seconds to dry. Same tone, medium. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Same thing with the shading. More noticeable in the writing here. While you're reading it, you do see it. So that's the same amount of shading, but the thicker lines let you really see it while you're shading, draws attention to what you're reading in a beautiful way. One of the things I like about shading ink is it draws the eye in while you're reading. It stands out, and I use it to try and get people to pay a little bit more attention to what it is I've wrote down, or written down, or had written, whatever that is. Tell me in the comments. I don't know. 22 seconds to dry. I'll take it for this look on this paper. The scrubby for both shows plenty of color variation, which we got in a writing sample. The smear test, I don't believe you could recover. Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 offers no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and I'm not seeing the color variation with the 1.1. The extra fine starts out noticeably as a lighter tone. That yellow helps bring it out. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Beautiful color variation in this writing, just like we were seeing with the Rhodia, just like with the Clairefontaine. Nice shading through this writing. 11 seconds to dry. The medium has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And just like with the Rhodia, the thicker lines make it actually stand out more as you're reading it than as a picture in a whole. We don't see it a ton just reading it here. We see it if I look at the page. I see the shading and it's beautiful. But here I see it while I'm reading, drawing attention to the words I've put on the page, which when you spend the time to write it, you want somebody to spend the time to really read it. Beautiful. 15 seconds to dry. The scrubby, they don't show us nearly as much color variation. The extra fine shows us some color variation, looking far left, far right. The medium doesn't show nearly the amount of color variation. We got a lot more of it up in the writing. The smear test says you could likely recover it. So look at the yellow Rhodia, which gives no bleeding, no ghosting. How about color change? Any color change for being on a yellow paper? And not really. This is a strong ink. I would like to think of it as more saturated at that point when we don't see the background really affect the ink color. That's a more saturated color, making it, or a more opaque color. Very nice. Very nice. Saturated as in the color, not necessarily the ink being a saturated ink. 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade in the writing. The extra fine, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and yes, we do see some light shading, but because the yellow background kind of brings up and makes that yellow undertones a little darker in their way, it brings them up, that we don't see as much of the shading. Again, stand back, look at it as a picture, and the UM looks darker than the J and the P. The FO looks darker than the X. The R and the N look darker than the rest of brown, but when I look at it as a whole, 11 seconds to dry. Now medium, again, I get to see the shading while I'm actually reading it. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. The shading is beautiful here. It shows in the words. It draws attention to the words. It makes you pay attention to the words on the page. Gorgeous. 15 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us color variation, which we did get, and the smear test says you could likely recover it. So white lines paper. White lines paper, unfortunately, it is bleeding. It's bleeding in spots. It doesn't touch the page underneath. The amount of bleeding makes it have a bunch of show-through renders under the back side of the page. It was like Porky Pig. I couldn't get it out. It makes the back side of the page, to me, unusable. All of these spots would be a problem for me. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shading. Only 1 second to dry. It goes in like a sponge. The medium had no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 3 seconds to dry. Again went in like a sponge. The scrubby of the extra fine shows a lot more color variation than we actually got. The scrubby of the medium showed us none. So the extra fine lied. It's not up here. The smear, I believe you could recover this if you did smear it while you were writing. So this is Strathmore writing paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. And just as a side, I like that it's so light, the lines, that they're little dots. See, so there's lines, but it's little dots. I don't like lines on my paper. I prefer blank paper. That's personally, I know a lot of people like the Rhodia dot pads. I just wind up finding all of those dots and all of that stuff distracting to me. I would rather write on a plain paper. I picked this up only to be able to test other writing papers. But I really like plain paper. And I love the tones on the writing papers, on the on these very nice correspondence papers. I think it makes the inks look very nice. 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. Noticeably lighter tone to start with, which is going to help us out on the extra fine, because it has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and here we get to see color variation as we read the words. Not just when we look back at the whole page like a picture. I'm back. I see the T is lighter than the H. I see the left side of the Q is darker than the UI. Beautiful all the way through. The C has a light spot between the C and the K. Gorgeous. Look at how dark that B is in brown, and it gets lighter and it gets darker again. Just wow. This paper, awesome. But look at that. Don't do that. Don't do that then. I just smeared it, just bashing my finger into it. Don't do that. This is a public service announcement. Apparently, if you do that to paper, even after it's dried, you have the opportunity of, I don't know, somehow smearing it. But this is not a waterproof ink. So it could be, just the moisture in my hands. I don't know. It's Florida. It's a humid place. 3 seconds to dry with the extra fine. I will take note of the fact that I was able to smudge that long after this was dried. But this has no permanence qualities to it. Medium. Noticeably darker tone than we got with the extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Gorgeous shading all the way through. Gorgeous. Look at quick. Starts dark, gets light, gets dark again to super dark. Wow. 7 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both shows us tons of variation. We got tons of variation. And the smear test says you could likely recover it, and I believe it. And that's all that I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Diamine's Golden Brown, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Being a nice lighter brown, I wanted something vivid, something interesting to go along with this. I chose Noodler's Black Swan and English Rose because it is a beautiful kind of red magenta color. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Diamine's Golden Brown? So what do I think of Diamine's Golden Brown? Those goldish undertones really seem to bring out the shading in most of the writing. It's a very interesting color to look at. Although I experienced a little bit of flow problems with this ink, which seemed strange to me, but that's what I got in the broader, wetter pens. So I don't know what happened there. I don't know if I was having an issue with that pen. I just experienced a flow problem that I was really not expecting. Thanks for watching.